and welcome to the Gazette discussion for 12th August 2021. My name is Harsh Singh and this discussion is on many interesting theme articles from the Gazette magazine. Now, our discussion is divided in two parts. The first part is the featured news, which is on Gilgit-Baltistan conundrum, the confusion in Gilgit-Baltistan area. Now, this is an important territorial part of India. Also, Pakistan has prepared a draft policy to create this particular region as its fifth state. Pakistan has got 4 states presently and it wants to integrate this as its fifth state. And in this context, we will understand why this confusion. Why do Pakistan and India both claim this region? What is the history to it? Right? Next, what is the strategic importance to it that these both countries are claiming here? Right? And then what is the say of the locals? So this is how this important article will get covered. This is the featured discussion for today. The second video will contain rest of the articles, which is on This Day in History photograph. 3 important update articles for you. The first one is on the Constitution Amendment Bill that relates to OBC reservation. And the second one is carbon cycle feedback, an important component of the IPCC report. And the third one is monetary policy report by RBI, an update on the same. Image of the day is on blob. Terms and concept for today are first, Ujjwala scheme relating to the LPG connections. The second one is Operation Green Scheme. The third one is Marburg virus. And the fourth KVKs, Krishi Vigyan Kendras. Editorials of the day. The 3 editorials that we have for you today are 1. India's railway and the privatization, how it is failing. The second one is on the electricity distribution companies and what are the issues and crises in it. And the third one is about monsoon session of the parliament. Though these are important editorials. Case study of the day is on altruism by an Israeli woman with a Gaza boy. We'll study what this case study is. This Day in History. We have dedicated This Day in History to phonograph because this is the day on which phonograph was invented by Thomas Alva Edison. Right? Phonograph is also called as gramophone, and this is the device through which people used to hear music during old times and until 1980s, after which cassettes they got introduced in the scene and later on CDs. Right? Okay. Snapshot 1 is on the 127th Constitutional Amendment Bill. Now, before we get into it, tell me one thing. There are OBCs in India, right? And does only the central government have the right to tell who are the OBCs in the country, to specify the OBC list, or does the state also have this right over it, right? Now, we have 2 lists, one central OBC list and one the state list for OBCs. The state list for OBCs is utilized for all the state government jobs, for the seats in the higher educational institution in the state government, right? So this list, state list, is different for all the particular states. For example, Jharkhand will have a different list and Rajasthan and then Tamil Nadu will have a different list, right? Because the composition of population of OBCs is different. So should center determine this or should the states determine this? Right. So this is what this bill is about. Right. Now, this latest amendment, it says that states have got the right to determine who are the OBCs in that particular state. Right. Earlier, Constitutional Amendment Bill 102 was created in which there were 2 important amendments that were done. First, the NCBC was made a constitutional body. National Commission for Backward Classes was made a constitutional body. And the President was notified. President was the one who was given the power to notify the list of the backward classes, OBCs, which are socially and educationally backward classes. So the President was to notify this, right? Later on, there was a Supreme Court judgment which said that the center is only empowered to notify the persons in this OBC list. And this is where this clarification has been mentioned by the Constitution Amendment. It says that no, for the particular people from the state, right, the state also is empowered. Yes, rest of it, center has got the power through the President to make this amendments in the particular list, right? So these are the changes which have been introduced, right? So the states have been now authorized to maintain their own state list. This is where the particular act clarifies that yes, states have got this right. Snapshot 2 is on carbon cycle feedbacks. Now we all know what carbon cycle is. Very simply stated, carbon cycle is about the movement of carbon around the earth, between the conversations between the carbon in the ecosystem, in the biota, in the atmosphere, right? So very simply, for example, if we start with emissions, so carbon is released in the atmosphere and later on this carbon is taken in by the plants, and this is how they create food. They take in carbon dioxide in presence of sunlight and water, and they create food, right? They also breathe, so they release carbon. They also decay, they release carbon. There are other organisms which breathe, they release carbon, and then this carbon that is released, that is later not only taken in by the plants and organisms, but also sequestered, that is stored. So this is the carbon cycle. This keeps on happening. But what is carbon cycle feedback? So carbon cycle feedback is the reinforcing mechanism of carbon in the earth, reinforcing, right? So it can be positively reinforcing and negatively reinforcing, right? It could increase the carbon level, it could also decrease the carbon level. And this is where the IPCC AR6 report, the assessment report 6 has said that there is a very complex interaction of carbon in the atmosphere, right? It can be positive as well and negative as well during the present circumstances. And the report says that it is very difficult to determine what is the carbon feedback happening in the atmosphere. So a very quick understanding into it, we will try to see through the Amazon rainforest die-off, right? And how this carbon cycle is getting reinforced. So let's start with rise in temperature, right? Now in this present world, temperature is rising, we all agree to it, right? Because of this rising temperature, there is a drought happening, and there are wildfires also happening around the world, right? They're increasing. Because of this, there is a decrease in the amount of forest present around Amazon rainforest. Yes, there is. So there is more release in the carbon dioxide, right? Now, because there are rainforests which are dying, do we have a rain happening in this area? No. Why? Because presence of trees also aids rain. Since rain is not happening, so therefore there is more temperature rise. So because of all this, we see what is happening. There is more carbon dioxide being released in the atmosphere. So carbon cycle gets accelerated, right? With the same process, there is acceleration in the amount of carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere. So this is the reinforcement of carbon cycle that we are talking of, carbon cycle feedback. Similarly, there's another carbon cycle that is happening in the oceans, right? When the temperature is rising, when the sea surface temperature is also rising, then there is more carbon dioxide absorption happening in the sea surface. And because of this, there is more amount of acidity in the oceans, right? Now, this acidity also plays very complexly, in a very complex manner, with the crustaceans, with the organisms which have got calcium cover over them, right? So this complex interplay also disables the mechanism of the dynamic balance of carbon in the oceans, right? So sometimes this is positive and sometimes this feedback is negative, right? Sometimes there is increase in carbon, sometimes there is decrease in carbon. Now, how can there be a decrease in carbon? So there are scientists who say that since you are increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, this also results in the generation of those plant species which can absorb more carbon dioxide, right? So there will be more such plant species and they'll be happy to reproduce more, right? So there will be more generation of these kind of green species and they will intake more carbon dioxide. They will intake more carbon dioxide as more of CO2 is generated. So this is a negative cycle for it, right? So the point I'm making here is that the Global Assessment Report 6 says that the timing and size of this release of carbon dioxide, this cannot be predicted because there are such complex interplay, positive and negative, in the carbon cycle. So this is where we understand the carbon cycle feedback mechanism through this article, right? So a quick read will make you understand what this is about. Snapshot 3 is on monetary policy report of the RBI. Now, earlier the monetary policy was decided by the governor of RBI, right? Now later this was made more inclusive by initiating the whole monetary policy through a monetary policy committee, right? This committee has got 6 members, 3 from the side of RBI and 3 from the side of government. The idea is to integrate the government point of views with the RBI to have better coordination with both the organizations and better accountability of RBI in its monetary policy, right? Largely it means bi-monthly, that means once in 2 months. It can also meet more frequently. The main idea has been to have 2 things. One, to introduce the benchmark lending rates for the succeeding period, for the coming times. That means what will be the lending rate for the banks to lend to the individual persons? What will be the lending rates when RBI lends money to the banks? So repo rate, reverse repo, MSF, etc. Also, RBI has got an important mandate, right, of maintaining the inflation for 4% plus minus 2%. So with the margin of 2% from 2 to 6%. This is the mandate of RBI and RBI is accountable for it. And this is why RBI changes the benchmark lending rates for the same, right? So this is what is RBI MPC about, and it lately released the report, right? So the report has not changed the policy rates right now. Why has it not changed? Why? Because we have seen that there is rising inflation happening, right? We also see that the growth is also not taking place. So for the growth to take place, RBI has to ease its monetary policy so that more money is in the market. On the other hand, to control inflation, right, it has to decrease the amount of money. So both of them trying to balance. It has not changed the policy rates this time. So kept the repo rate at 4% and reverse repo rate at 3.35%, right? So this is the counterbalance between growth rate and inflation, right? It has also left the interest rates unchanged. So banks will have the stable lending rate for now. What is variable rate reverse repos? Now what happens is that when RBI has introduced this repo rate concept, repo and reverse repo, this will change only in 1 or 2 months, right? But variable rate reverse repo, what it does is that RBI introduces some variable rates so that some purchasing and repurchasing of bills can be done in the market in the short run, right? So variable rates are introduced. Now this is to have a better management of the financial market so that RBI has got better control. Repo rate can only be changed once or twice, right, in 2 months. But this variable repo rate, this will change it frequently. So this is a short-term mechanism by which, short-term tool by which RBI tries to have better control over the market. RBI also has held the accommodative stance. That means it will not print more money. It will not print more notes. It will participate in the secondary market operations, right? It will participate and try to inject money in the secondary market rather than pushing in money through printing of money. So this is the accommodative stance. We have discussed this in many of the featured articles last month. Optimism for recovery. RBI also said that there is a lot of optimism for recovery because it has seen a lot of consumption happening. Also, because increase of emission are directly proportional to industrial activity, there is indication that there will be recovery, right? There is a demand in the market, right? India is importing higher amount of goods, so that is indicative of good recovery happening in the future. So this is the report by RBI. Image of the day is on blob. What is blob? Blob is an unclassified organism, and this blob is being used in International Space Station to carry out research. This blob will research on the weightlessness, the impact of weightlessness on itself, right? And this is how scientists at ISS will be able to determine what is the impact of weightlessness on organisms outside the Earth, right, region. And blob has got certain very peculiar features. For example, it does not reproduce, right? It eats, grows and moves, right? Although it has got no mouth, leg or brain, right? So very peculiar features this organism has got. Term and concept. The first term that we discussed today is the Ujjwala 2.0 scheme. Now Prime Minister Ujjwala Yojana, PMUY, second part has been introduced. The first part that was introduced in 2016 had only one important component, that is the people. The people will get deposit-free LPG connections, right? Deposit-free LPG connections. So this amounted to around 1600 rupees of profit for the poorer community, right? But the second scheme says that they will also be given one particular gas stove, that means stove or the burner, and they will also be given one free refill, that means one gas which has been filled already. So this will be the additional benefit that people will receive this time, right? The idea has been to extend the scheme to the poorer communities throughout the country. So deprived women in the poor households will receive this connection free of cost. The next term and concept is Operation Green Scheme. This was launched in the year 2018. The main agenda of this scheme was to have the integrated development of TOP. What does TOP stand for? Tomato, onion and potato. So the integrated management of TOP, so that it does not get wasted, so that the farmers get their proper return, remuneration on these crops, and the processing in these particular domain, TOP be done properly. So this is the main agenda behind introducing Operation Green Scheme. Now the government has expanded the reach of Operation Green in terms of the region it covers, the region, and also in the number of crops it covers, right? So green vegetables and fruits have been included in this. The main important point right now is that the government has introduced 50% air transport subsidy while transporting these crops or fruits and vegetables from the northeast and Himalayan states. So this is a welcome step. This is where I would like to remind you two important schemes that the government has: Kisan Rail and Krishi Udan scheme, through which government is trying to transport these important vegetables and crops from those areas which are less market oriented towards the markets, right? So this is the update regarding TOP and the Operation Green Scheme. The next term and concept is Marburg virus. What is this virus? This virus is not new to Earth. This was first found, recognized in 1967 when a disease broke out in Europe. In Germany and Serbia, right? This was associated with experiments on green monkeys which were brought from Africa, right? So something that probably man has themselves created, right? Man has himself created. So the fertility ratio in this disease is very high. This also transfers from human to human. Also to note that Marburg is a place in Germany, right? So this is also stigmatizing a particular place here through this route. Now also to note, the virus gets got to humans also through prolonged exposure to mines and caves where these particular bat colonies are also residing, right? So there are two ways in which it has proceeded. One is through green monkeys and the other one is through these bats, right? The world over has seen many breakout of this Marburg virus, around 12 of them, and many of them in Africa itself. So this is the update regarding this article, right? Now Guinea has also found this new outbreak of this virus. So this is the Guinea region, Ivory Coast, etc., all of them together, right? There is no specific treatment or vaccine for this disease. The fourth term and concept for today is Krishi Vigyan Kendra. Krishi Vigyan Kendra are very important institutions in the field of agricultural activity because they act as bridge institutions between the research organizations of India and the extension bodies. Extension means the one that provides support to the farmers. They provide support to the farmers in multiple ways. How? First of all, the kind of products that they research upon, they are disseminated to the farmers through these organizations. Not only that, these are pulse seed hubs, right? Soil testing kits, micro irrigation facilities. So all the innovative products, all the kind of new farm machinery, they are transferred to the people from Krishi Vigyan Kendra. The news update is that the government is trying to have 1 KVK in every rural district, which is very important. Presently, India has 725 KVKs, right? So India has got around 700 districts and we already have these many KVKs, Krishi Vigyan Kendra. However, we need to have them in all the rural districts. The first editorial for today is on the Indian Railways failed attempt to attract bids for privatization of railways. Now, this is a very important news. Why? Because it is very sad to know that private players did not participate in the bid. In the bid, the article says that there were zero bids for 9 clusters and only 2 bids for 3 clusters. That means the private participation thinks that this is not profitable for themselves, right? So the article talks about what are the issues. The issues that it says are first, the government is trying to have more capital and more technology for themselves through private participation, but they are not ready to give up the control. So private participation needs their own control, their own management, right? The second issue is that the private players spending in a lot of money with a lot of risk because they do not know how many passengers will be traveling in that particular route, right? Also, they will be procuring these trains, they will be purchasing these trains, and the government is not ready to take the trains back in case there is less profit or in case they run in losses. So these are the kind of issues. The article says that there are 3 ways in which this whole situation can be helped. First of all, we have to have state-of-the-art stock. That means we have to have the state-of-art technology to develop these kind of railway infrastructure, the track system, the trains, the platforms, etc. So this is the first, state-of-the-art institutions, state-of-the-art stocks. The second one is we need to have boost in private investment, and the third is idea to generate profit, and that is how Indian Railways will progress, right? This is where it takes the example of China. The article says that China, before having had these fastest railways around the world, it built labs around, it built universities and research institutions, and 50s of them. This is what the country has done. What has India done? So this is a thought-provoking moment for India, right? Also, the article says that we need to lease the stock. That means if the private organizations are in a thought to purchase railway wagons, this is going to be very expensive. So IRFC, right, Finance Corporation, these type of organizations can own the railway stock and they can lease the stock to particular organizations, the private bodies which are running the railways. So this mechanism will make it a lot more efficient, right? Also, the article speaks about reducing the period of concession. So the Indian Railways is giving some particular concession to new people, to bidders, and this, through making the whole system more efficient, the period of concession can be reduced from 30 to 35 year period to 15-year period. This is what the editorial speaks of. So important suggestions being given and important points being given. So you can note these important points. The second editorial is on the power distribution companies. The article starts by saying that the various schemes which have been implemented by the government to ensure that power companies, they reduce their losses, but this is not happening, right? Time and again the government has tried to infuse funds, but this is still leading to more inefficiency in the system. This is where the article points that presently the inefficiencies run to the scale of 22 to 42%. This is the scale of loss, and the idea is to reduce the loss to 12 to 15%. This is what the article says, right? There are various schemes which have been introduced by the government, for example schemes to improve the distribution infrastructure, but the article says infrastructure is not an issue here. Reducing the inefficiency in the revenue, in the profit generation is a management issue. It is a managerial issue. It is not the issue of infrastructure creation, right? This is where the article talks of ACS and ARR. Very important concepts. Very, very important when you talk of power schemes, right? Power distribution companies. So ACS stands for average cost of supply. Average cost of supply. This is the amount that is invested by the power company to supply, right, the electricity. And ARR stands for average revenue realized. So how much they are earning. Now this is where the gap has to be reduced. The gap between ACS and ARR has to be reduced. This is what the article says. The article also mentions a lot of schemes which have been run by the government, right? Accelerated power development scheme and many other schemes to improve the infrastructure, but that is not the point of contention. Managerial issues right now are. So Uday scheme is one of the schemes for which the article has given the example here, right? So this is where I'll quickly take you to the Uday scheme because it was a very important scheme. Now, Uday scheme was introduced in the year 2015, right? The main idea behind this Ujjwala Discom Assurance Yojana was that, one, the idea was to reduce the technical and commercial losses. This is one. Second is tariff revision. The third one is reduce the gap between ACS and ARR. We'll discuss why. The fourth one is debt management and then having metering solutions. So the way in which more efficiency could be done in metering. Metering, that means how much money has to be taken from the person who has consumed electricity. And the sixth one is having renewable energy participation in the distribution companies as well. Now, when the scheme has been introduced to initiate these many things, that means the problem also lies here, right? So the aggregate transmission and the technical and commercial loss. Technical loss is the power lost in transmission or distribution. So this is the loss that happens because of attenuation, right? So while the power is getting transmitted from one of important poles to the other, there is loss in the distribution. So around 25% of power is lost there. Technical loss cannot be avoided. We have to have efficient infrastructure. This is one thing about it. The second one is commercial loss. Commercial loss means not being able to recover the money for which we have already paid, right? For which the power company has already paid. So theft or no metering, these are the issues, right? Tariff revision. The government does not revise the tariff. Why? Because there's a politically motivated agenda, right? Because if it raises the tariff, then people will have to pay the money and they might not vote for the government. So tariff revision is something that does not happen. Uday wanted it to happen, right? Reduce the gap between ACS and ARR. That means how much the company has spent and how much revenue it is having. If this amount is reduced, the difference is reduced, then is when the losses will be curtailed, right? Debt management. A lot of state governments have tried to take in some of the other part of the debt of these companies, right? So this is what was the Uday scheme which it was introduced for. But later, initially it did show some success, but later it also ran into a lot of issues. And then we see 22 to 40% of power company losses. So this is what the article mentions, right? The article says that supervision is very important and giving scores to distribution company is a very technical task, because some of the companies have some parameters in which they are running and others have different parameters. This is where the article suggests that it is good to have privatization, because the privatization of power distribution companies in Delhi was a very big success. This is where the government introduced some or the other transit mechanism. The government participated in paying some amount to these private companies, private distribution companies, and slowly and steadily when they became profitable, government withdrew its incentives, right? And then these companies became profitable. The article also introduces the example of Odisha, where this technique did not succeed, but article largely speaks of in favor of privatizing the power distribution companies. Also, the government is trying to introduce an important bill, a bill in which the whole power sector will be deregulated of licensing, right? So this is the important update in the article, a very important article. Now through this article, we have covered a lot of various things, right? That they could be a part of Snapshot, about detailed understanding on which you can write answers on distribution companies also, right? In the next session of the parliament, we might see a bill on the deregulation of the licensing of distribution companies. The third editorial for today is on monsoon session of the parliament. The article criticizes the way monsoon session was conducted. It says that it took only average 10 minutes for the Lok Sabha to pass a bill, and it took average only 30 minutes for the Rajya Sabha to pass a bill. So where is the conversation? Where is the conversation and discussion happening on the bills? Where is it being sent to the Senate committee for its research and to scrutiny, right? The opposition needs to hold the government accountable, but opposition, in spite of doing the 3 Ds, discussion, debate, dissent, it is stalling the parliament, right? It is stalling the parliament. So this is not required. The article says that the idea should be that the government should be accommodative of the opposition, and the opposition should be responsible in these times. 13 bills were passed in the Lok Sabha with only the person who the minister responsible speaking on the bill. Nobody else spoke on the particular bill. So where was the scrutiny? Where were discussions, right? So there's a reduction in the start questions in the parliament. There were 16 laws passed, and the situation was so dismal that there was hardly any conversation on these laws. This is what the article says, right? This is where a good example of British Parliament could be given, where we discuss this. We discuss in one of the editorials that if there are more than 100 days of discussion in the parliament, then the opposition also is given certain number of days to decide the agenda for discussion. So say 20 days. So this is how Indian Parliament can also function. A good example of it. So this is the third editorial. Case study of the day is the case study of kindness. This woman from Israel, she donated one of her kidneys to a boy from Gaza. So she gave this boy a new lease of life because of her act of generosity, act of kindness. She's a teacher from Israel. Her name is Edith Siegel. And one important thing that I got to know from this article is that if these are two different countries and one person is waiting for an organ donation from one country, another person is also here ready to donate this organ, there is a concept of reciprocity. That means this person will be able to donate to another country only if somebody from this country is donating a kidney to this particular country, to the other country. So in this case, if Palestine boy was to receive a kidney from this lady, somebody from Palestine was also required to give a kidney to Israel, and the father of this boy did donate the kidney on the same day this kidney was received by the boy. So this is the law of reciprocity, and this is not applicable in all the countries. All the countries do not follow it. However, this was followed in this particular case. So this is the case study of altruism, of kindness, of a person going beyond the animosity, the regional animosity. For example, the animosity between Israel and Palestine. So a beautiful case study we all as future civil servants ought to follow. Thanks for watching.